Good evening, friends. Let us be still for a moment, and in this very breath, see if a presence already here can do the work. If, right now, you discovered that the Jesus you've been seeking outside is the living Christ within you, what would change? Fear loosens. Lack yields. The storm quiets, not because we plead with a distant power, but because we rest in the one presence, the infinite invisible, as our very life. Tonight our theme is, what happens when you truly understand who Jesus Christ is? Not a far-off figure to admire, but the divine sonship, the light of God, functioning as your own true identity. Jesus revealed it, embodied it, pointed to it, and invited us to behold it. When you catch even a glimmer of this, prayer becomes communion, not petition, supply becomes grace, not struggle, healing becomes the natural outflow of realized oneness. If this word finds a home in you, like the video, comment 777 to affirm your yes, and subscribe so we can sit in this silence together. In the next few moments, we'll take the single inner step that makes this more than theory. Are you ready to witness how the same Christ that stilled the sea can still your inner winds, here and now? And so we turn inward, not to construct a new belief, but to notice what has been quietly present all along the life that looks out through your eyes, hears through your ears, loves through your heart. Scripture names this life the Christ, not a personality to worship at a distance, but the very root of your being. To recognize this is not to make yourself grand, it is to become transparent, to let go of the heavy costume of me, and let the light that never began shine unhidden. When you touch this within, you do not become someone else, you discover you have never been separate. Identity rearranges itself around a center that cannot be threatened. The mind that worries, compares, defends, and strategizes begins to relax because it is no longer in charge of inventing safety. The sense of a lonely self, pushing life uphill, finds it can rest in a deeper self already at home. In that rest, clarity dawns. You see that the qualities you admired in Jesus, compassion, authority, forgiveness, fearlessness, were not exceptions. They were the natural expression of an identity grounded in God. This is practical. In the pressure of a day, pause and ask, who is living this moment? Feel for the quiet current underneath the surface chatter. Let it be the you answer from. You will notice a new tone entering your speech, a new steadiness in your choices. You won't need to announce it. People around you will sense it as presence, as availability, as non-reactive love. The outer scene may not change at once, but the inner posture does, and with that shift, the outer cannot help but reconfigure. Do not mistake this for autosuggestion. You are not trying to convince yourself of anything. You are consenting to what is. The branch does not make fruit by trying. It abides in the vine, and the life of the vine bears fruit through it. So with you, to abide in the awareness of Christ as your true identity is to allow wisdom to think in you, peace to stabilize you, mercy to move through you. Sometimes this shows up as guidance, sometimes as courage, sometimes as a simple capacity to be still when everything in you wants to hurry. There will be moments when the old identity resurfaces, insisting on its stories, unworthiness, pride, resentment, fear. Notice it without condemnation. Return to center by a gentle remembrance. I live, yet not I. A deeper life lives in me. Let that become the atmosphere in which your thoughts arise, the ground on which your actions stand. Over time, the reflex to grasp, defend, and perform loses its authority, and a quieter certainty takes its place, the kind that does not need to be proved because it is constantly being experienced. As this identity clarifies, it naturally harmonizes your relationships and work. You begin to meet others not as roles, but as fellow bearers of the same life. Criticism softens into discernment, ambition into service. Even your body responds to this alignment. Breath deepens, tension unwinds, and strength becomes available without strain. You are not manufacturing harmony, you are yielding to what already is. Each moment becomes an altar where the inner yes is offered again, and grace meets it with quiet sufficiency here. From that altar of consent, something quieter than thought begins to disclose itself. There are not many presences vying for attention. There is one presence, one power, the infinite invisible. This presence is not personal will or improved self-esteem. It is the very life that is being life everywhere, the love that sustains sparrow and constellation, heartbeat and ocean tide. When this is glimpsed, conflict loses its premise, because conflict requires two powers. The moment you stop assigning power to appearances, fear, lack, opposition, you discover they feed on your belief in them. Withdraw the belief, not by struggle but by beholding, and the shadow must yield to light, not because you forced it out, but because it never had substance of its own. This is not denial of experience, it is right appraisal. A shadow on the wall is not an enemy to conquer, it is a condition corrected by turning to the light. So in practice, when the phone rings with difficult news, when the account looks thin, when a personality tries to provoke, refuse the temptation to set up a courtroom in your mind with God on one side and the problem on the other. There is no other. One presence means there is no second presence called danger, chance, or curse. Notice how the nervous system softens the instant you cease defending a self apart from God, and instead consent to the fact that the infinite invisible is the only animating cause present, the only law operating, the only mind thinking. Prayer here becomes a listening more than a speaking. You enter the inner quiet not to persuade, but to witness. Father, you already are. Let that be the attitude. Rest as awareness, and let the presence announce itself. Sometimes it arrives as a simple peace. Sometimes as a gentle instruction, wait, call, forgive, move. Sometimes as a rearrangement of circumstances you could not have engineered. But the pivot is always the same. You did not take up arms against an opposing force. You refused to grant it reality, and by that refusal you stayed faithful to one power. Consider how this transforms ordinary moments. A negotiation shifts from winning to serving equity, because one presence rules both sides. A household irritation softens when you remember there is not my will and their will, but a single will expressing harmony where tension appears. What even in traffic, you can sit consciously as a clearing in the stream, letting the infinite invisible govern flow rather than joining the current of impatience. This is not passivity, it is the most dynamic stance possible, because it aligns you with the only real activity there is, the movement of God as law, order, and fulfillment. If fear arises, do not fight it, lay it on the altar of one. Say within, I recognize no power apart from the presence. Then wait a beat longer than habit, and give space for the invisible to bear witness. You will note that choices become simpler, speech becomes cleaner, and doors open without your pushing. What you thought required pressure reveals it only needed alignment. The how of outcome ceases to be your burden as you discover that consciousness is the substance of all form and knows how to appear as supply, as right contacts, as timing, as rest. Abiding here, you begin to feel the invisible go before you into rooms and letters and tasks, straightening what felt crooked, easing roughness without argument, bathing each scene in a quiet assurance that does not depend on who agrees or disagrees, because it does not derive its authority from persons but from presence. And you find yourself trusting that even before words form, the atmosphere itself can carry the message of one power. From such an atmosphere, prayer no longer feels like sending words upward. It is the awareness of God communing with God within you. The most potent prayer is frequently wordless because it is not an attempt to set cause in motion. Cause is already infinitely active. It is recognition. You become still enough to sense the infinite invisible as the only presence present, and in that stillness your thought loosens its grip on outcomes and timetables. Silence is not a vacuum, it is a living fullness, a quiet radiance that begins to disclose itself when you cease telling God what you need and allow God to be what God is. In this communion, the heart listens, and the listening itself is prayer. Practically, this means you take your seat, as you are, and let the body settle. The breath is not managed, it is noticed. Let a single inner consent arise, Father, reveal thyself, then drop even the words. Sit in receptive alertness as one tuned instrument awaiting the touch of the bow. Thoughts pass, memories, plans, fragments of conversation. Do not wrestle with them, let them float by in the spaciousness of awareness. The aim is not a blank mind but a yielded one, a soft warmth, a quiet ease, a sense of wideness may come. Or nothing in particular, stay anyway. The silence needs no fireworks to be itself in this light. Prayer ceases to be petition and becomes participation. Petition maintains the illusion of two powers, problem and solution, separated by distance. Communion reveals one power already here, and as you rest in that fact, you find you cannot sincerely ask for things, you are drawn instead to seek God for God. Then the ancient word proves true. Your Father knows what things you have need of. Without bargaining or mental outlining, what is needed appears as form appropriate to the moment. Because form follows realization, you will notice practical changes. After communion, ideas arise with a quality of rightness that needs no argument. You may be prompted to call, to wait, to apologize, to proceed, simple, unforced instructions that carry peace. Speech shortens, pauses deepen. You feel carried rather than pushing. In difficult encounters, this inward hush speaks more than eloquence, and the tone of a room shifts without effort. Healing, when it occurs, is recognized as the fruit of beholding wholeness, not the result of a technique. You did not set out to fix, you stood still and witnessed what is true, and the appearance yielded if dryness or restlessness visits your practice. Do not conclude nothing is happening. Keep the appointment with the silence. Short periods, many times a day, are better than long, strained efforts. Before you answer an email, enter a meeting, or pick up the phone, pause even for 10 seconds and re-establish awareness of one presence. Let the first moments of morning and the last moments before sleep be gently reserved for this holy listening. Over time, the background hum of inner communion continues as you move through tasks, a quiet abiding in the secret place that turns ordinary actions into sacraments. The branch does not strain to receive the sap, it abides, and the life flows, so you begin to discover that what once demanded grind yields to a subtle order you do not have to manufacture, and what used to require strain now moves of itself. This is grace, not a prize earned, but a presence recognized. Human effort lives on a treadmill of make it happen, measuring worth by output and security by control. Grace moves from a different center. It does not cancel action, it purifies it of strain. It takes the sand out of the gears. When the door relaxes into the being that actually does, tasks unclench. Time widens, and a right sequence, unseen until now, organizes itself without your pushing. In grace, you discover that guidance precedes motion. The inner nudge comes first, then the step, and only then the understanding of why. You are spared the fatigue of forcing outcomes and the regret of premature action. Some days grace looks like swiftness. Emails resolve in 2 lines. The perfect phrase arrives mid-sentence. The right person calls without prompting. Another day grace looks like waiting, like leaving a draft unsent, like walking away from a bargain that flatters the ego but doesn't carry life. The outer pace varies, the inner tone does not. It is ease, this is not laziness. It is the Sabbath woven into the fabric of every hour. The rest of knowing that the law of God is the only law in operation. Take no thought becomes a lived practice, not neglect. You still prepare, but the preparation is quiet, proportionate, clean. You still meet appointments, but you travel without the heavy suitcase of anxiety. When interruptions come, they are received as part of a choreography you didn't plan yet somehow serve. You begin to trust rhythm over rush. Watch for the early signs of effort, taking the Rian's tight breath, hurry in the voice, the impulse to over-explain or over-promise. Use them as bells, not as reasons for self-criticism. Pause. Acknowledge one presence. Whisper inwardly, "Thank you, Father," and wait a beat longer than habit. Let the next movement come to you rather than from you. If none comes, do the simple next thing in front of you with an untroubled heart. Grace loves the ordinary doorway. It handles dishes and budgets and schedules as easily as it handles crises, because it is not your limited strength working at all. In relationships, grace removes the tug of war. You stop attempting to manage another's perception and return to beholding the Christ where a personality seems to be. Words lighten. Listening deepens. Corrections, when necessary, arise free of sting. You notice that what once required a long argument now settles with a look, a silence, a single truthful sentence. The point is not to win, it is to let harmony disclose itself. By recognizing the one life present as both of you in creative work, grace turns grind into flow. Instead of wrestling ideas onto the page or the canvas, you take your place, open the channel, and let the infinite invisible express. Drafts refine themselves as if an unseen editor were at your elbow. Dead ends become pivots. You sense when to stop for the day, and in that stop, the work continues underground, rising ready by morning. You are no longer wringing results from your nerves. You are hosting a river. Supply under grace loses the edge of scarcity. You give up chasing and begin serving. Opportunities appear as the natural language of usefulness. Money becomes a form of circulation rather than a measure of safety. Needs are met in right measure, on right timing, sometimes through channels you could not have named yesterday. Gratitude becomes spontaneous because you know you did not engineer the blessing. You recognized it and cooperated. Keep the doorway open. Small, faithful pauses weave a climate where grace can be noticed. Return often to the inner quiet, not to get, but to consent. Then move in the simplicity that follows, attentive to the signature of grace. Lightness, sufficiency, congruence. A steady joy that does not depend on the scene but suffuses it, and with it the sense that the presence goes before you and prepares the way. Even as you take the step from that trust, the posture matures into witnessing. I can of mine own self do nothing. This is not self-belittling, it is lucid honesty. The Father within doth the works. The moment the sense of a separate door loosens, space opens for the infinite invisible to express as intelligence, timing, and form. A window does not create sunlight, it allows it. A flute does not invent breath, it yields a clear tone when it is empty and aligned. So with you, availability replaces exertion. Transparency replaces self-importance in practice. Begin each task with a pause. Who acts here? Let the answer be silence. Then consent, Father, be the life of this. Move only on the inner, yes, the quiet click that carries peace. In conversations, witness rather than perform. Listen from the center beneath words. You will hear hurt behind anger, confusion behind control, innocence behind bluster. Responses simplify. The need to convince or defend ebbs, and truth, when spoken, lands without force, because it is not yours. It is what is. Witnessing also means refusing to fix appearances with personal power. Behold rather than battle. Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. Hold inwardly to one presence, and watch as the tightness around problems loosens. You are not manipulating outcomes with thought. You are staying faithful to reality and letting shadows resolve in their own way and time. This is why techniques fail when ego wields them and succeed when surrendered awareness beholds. It is God being God, not mind maneuvering mind. Do not mistake witnessing for passivity. It is the most alert responsiveness. Sometimes it moves you swiftly. A call placed at the exact minute, a precise phrase spoken once, a decisive no that saves months of entanglement. Sometimes it arrests you in mid-sentence and asks for silence. The hallmark is congruence, no inner wobble, no aftertaste of strain. You are not calculating, you are obeying. Not by might nor by power, but by my spirit. And spirit knows its own choreography better than our outlining ever can. Notice how effectiveness increases as personal doership decreases. Projects that previously needed 10 steps now unfold in 3. Errors are caught before they hatch. The right help arrives unbidden because the atmosphere you carry invites order. Credit is naturally returned to its source. Gratitude flows without performance. Thank you, Father, because you know you did not make the river. You simply kept the channel clear when old habits surge, the urge to push, to fix, to prove. Treat them as bells of mindfulness. Stop. Remember, I can of mine own self do nothing. The Father within me doth the works. Breathe the words, not as a charm, but as a fact. Let the nervous system reset in that fact. Then take the next simple step given, or wait without dread until it is given. Humility here is not self-negation, it is accuracy about agency, and it frees love to do what pressure never could make. This a quiet liturgy through the day. Before emails, meetings, errands, parenting, study. Not I, but Christ lives in me. In conflict, behold the same life where a separate self appears, and watch the heat lower without a winner and loser. In solitude, sit empty and willing, a flute on the sill of God, and discover how the one presence thinks, speaks, serves, and completes through the transparency of a life that no longer needs to be the doer. Then healing ceases to be an event to chase. It becomes the outflow of realized oneness, where two powers seem to contend, problem and cure. One presence is recognized, and the appearance loses its premise. Darkness is not a substance to fight, it is the absence of light. Turn to the light, and the shadow cannot argue. In the same way, turn from diagnosing life as broken to beholding life as whole, and what needs to yield, yields. This is not a mental decree imposed on matter. It is the quiet discovery that the Christ at the center is already intact, and as you rest there, the body, the mind, the scenery forms around that center without strain. So when pain visits, or a diagnosis arrives with its heavy syllables, respond first with stillness. Do not debate with symptoms, and do not bargain with God. Breathe, consent, and remember I and the Father are one. Let that remembrance become atmosphere, not argument. You are not trying to get God into the situation, you are realizing there is no situation outside of God. If fear surges, which is natural, turn fear itself into prayer by placing it in the presence and refusing to grant it an independent will. Often this simple shift loosens the grip of panic, and in that loosening, you can hear the small, wise instruction that follows. Sometimes the instruction is practical. Rest now, drink water, call this person, decline that invitation. Take it without superstition. Use any human means you are led to use, but do not assign them power. The power is God, the means are vessels. A pill, a physician, a procedure may serve as channels, but the healing is the dawning of truth in consciousness that reveals wholeness as the fact and allows form to catch up. Other times the instruction is simply be still. Sit in the secret place and behold. You may feel a warmth move through you, or a release, or only a clear quiet. Do not measure. Stay faithful to beholding. Healing includes the realm of thought and relationship. A grievance is a fever of the heart. When you behold the Christ, where an offender seems to stand, the fever breaks. Forgiveness ceases to be an effort of will and becomes the recognition of one life appearing as many. Words soften, and what looked like a knot unties itself. Patterns of compulsion weaken, because you are no longer feeding them with the belief that they possess a power separate from God. Even long-standing narratives, this is just who I am, this is how it always goes, begin to thin when you stop rehearsing them and instead witness the presence as the only author of your being. Notice the signatures of true healing. Peace precedes proof. Gratitude wells up before outcomes finalize. You feel released from the inner argument, even while outer forms are still moving into place. The body often follows with ease, sleep resets, breath deepens, appetite balances, because the system is no longer obeying the law of fear, but the law of life. You find yourself naturally choosing what supports harmony without asceticism or compulsion, because the center is quiet and the choices align with it. Hold to righteous judgment, not the report of the senses as final, but the truth of God as cause and substance. Let your practice be steady and light, frequent returning to center, brief wordless acknowledgments of one presence, gentle refusals to enthrone appearances. In that climate, healings appear as ripples of a deeper fact already present, and you recognize that the Christ in the midst of you is the health of your countenance and the light of your day.